her book. And this book says on the back that it chronicles the first year. They're still singing and bringing a sense of continuity, fun, and optimism to tax the rich demonstrations, the 15-hour picket lines, Black Lives Matter vigils, and anti-fracking rallies. Quite a lot of different movements. So Occupella is one of the books that Nancy has written, and I'm going to, the other one is Just Enough to Make a Story. So I'm going to let Nancy introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her background and career, and so on. So off you go, Nancy.
Okay. I was born in Omaha, but I'm not from Omaha. I'm lifting a line out of a New Yorker cartoon of a guy saying to a woman at a party, "I was born in Des Moines, but I'm not from there." We left Omaha when I wasn't walking yet, so I have no memory of my time there. My parents were there organizing. It was the midst of the Depression. I was born in 1935. And my father had been one of the organizers of the Ford Hunger March in Detroit. He was from Michigan, and my mother was born in San Francisco, and I was born in between. Early on, as soon as I started learning to talk, my father started teaching me to speak, which is different. He had me get up on the wood box next to the fireplace and put my little fist in the air and say, "We want more pork and beans." So that was my introduction to activism. And this was after we had moved to Berkeley, and the story that he told was that they took me to a socialist picnic, and he saw that I was very interested in the speakers, and he asked me if I wanted to give a speech. And I said yes. So he took me up to the stage and said to the chair, "This little comrade would like to make a speech." And so when the speaker was finished, they put me up on the stage, and I put my hand in the air and said, "We want more pork and beans." And, I suppose I got a good reception, and that's probably why I don't have the fear of public speaking that so many people, they say, have. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. I was interested in a lot of different things. We had moved to Long Beach, when I was in the 5th grade, which luckily has a very good school system. So I went to an excellent high school. Majored in science, came back and started Cal, and realized when I graduated that I didn't want to be a psychologist. I'd majored in psychology. And a few years later, I decided to go to library school. I was inspired by the local librarian on Potrero Hill in San Francisco, where I was living. Because she not only put people and information together, but she put people and people together, which I've been doing ever since. And also, being a children's librarian, which is what I decided on, is the perfect thing for someone who's interested in too many different things, because so are kids. And so, knowing a little bit about a lot of things was just fine. And I did that for quite a while. Loved the work, hated the meetings, which may be why I'm in Occupella now, because we're mostly not having meetings, but just doing stuff. Anyway, I got into storytelling as a children's librarian and then started teaching it. And I ended up writing a book about it, mainly because I was teaching classes and I was at the ditto machine, making handouts with lists of stories for different ages and that kind of thing. And thought, well, I might as well put this into a book, and then I can just do that and it'll be there. And I, in order to start the book off, I asked one of my students at the first meeting of a class, this was in Madison, Wisconsin at the library school, to record the first bit of what I was saying to introduce people to what the class was going to be about. And she did that, and that became the introduction to my book. So I really wrote that little first part orally rather than pen and paper. But, I'm a storyteller, so that worked. And then there's chapters about learning a story, choosing a story, learning a story, telling a story. And the little bit I thought I'd read is something that I think is useful information, whether you're a storyteller or not. I usually warn the audience if I'm going to tell a scary or a bloody story, then they can brace themselves and say, that wasn't so scary afterwards. And it wasn't so scary listening in a group, but it might be thinking about it alone later. Catherine Wyndham, who tells ghost stories most convincingly, also passes on a few beliefs about how to keep ghosts away at night. The simplest is to place your shoes with one pointing toward your bed and one pointing away. So, simple enough.
So, Nancy, let me ask you a question about storytelling.
Uh-huh.
I know that some lawyers hired you to give a class to a legal firm about storytelling. Why
Yeah.
would they do that?
Because part of the function of a trial lawyer is to present the case to the jury in an interesting way and to make the story flow so it comes into their minds. And it was a very interesting time for me too, that I was there with the lawyers, because they were saying, of course, we're restricted as to what we can say. It has to be, there's all kinds of legal mechanisms you have to go through before you can present something. So in that way, it's different. But certainly as far as a story conveying information in a way that's more receivable than just a list of facts, and which I certainly feel is the way I learn. And I would rather read a book that has a lot of stories in it than one that's just facts, even if it's about, economics or whatever it is. I want the stories.
So, besides writing the book about storytelling, were you always writing songs?
No, I really started that. Well, after I left my husband, after 17 years of marriage, during which I had only written one poem, whereas I'd been writing poems when I was in high school and college, I started writing poetry again. And then it started coming out with meter and rhyme, and it started looking like song lyrics. So I started writing songs. I came out as a lesbian, and my partner and I started traveling around I tried to go part-time with the library so I could spend more time storytelling. They wouldn't do it. So I quit and we went on the road. And that was great because she was an organizer and I was a storyteller, and we were doing both. She was organizing feminist library workers. And we were doing that connecting things where we were in Omaha and we talk to a librarian there, and she'd say, I'm working on this and this. And we'd say, oh, yeah, we met someone in Reno who was doing that very same thing. You two ought to get together. This was before the internet, and this was a way that that could happen. So I was definitely still being a librarian.
Mhm. And were you always using old songs and writing parodies, or sort of bringing them up to date?
Yes, I was doing that. Um, I was in the peace movement in the 60s and writing parodies there to old songs and making little songbooks for peace marches. So I definitely started that way before I ever started writing songs, the whole song. And that's a lot of what Occupella does, is parodies.
So, when did you actually start uh, participating in the Occupy movement, and what gave you the idea for Occupella for writing the book?
Well, I started, I started in going to Occupy in Berkeley when they had a downtown section as well as the civic center section where the tents were, but there was a place in front of the Bank of America where there was a little plaza, and of course now it's that big new building. And I thought I would just sit there, and be part of it, and write something. I brought along a notebook and thought, because I was working on some stuff, and I found myself writing what was happening. So in a way, I was writing not with any goal in mind, just writing. And Bonnie Lockhart started bringing her guitar down there, and we would sing, and other people came, and sort of the word got around. We had a group singing, and we started doing it in Oakland. And most of us knew each other from Freedom Song Network, which had been singing for, picket lines and whatever for a long time. And or we were friends of friends or whatever. And so we gathered this group together and started.
How many were you?
Well, it varied, from day to day, but the core group we ended up with was 5 who actually met and made decisions about what songs we were going to sing and making lyric sheets to hand out and that kind of thing. So sort of doing the business of it.
So give us a gist of what is Occupella about.
We're about getting other people to sing. We're not about performing. So that's why whoever shows up is Occupella. And if people want us to come, we say, if any 2 of us can come, that's Occupella, of the core group when we're deciding where to go and what to do. So it's kind of permeable.
So the book sort of feels very much like a journal that you kept.
Yes, it is. It started out just writing down what was happening, just to have it. And then and I was in after we had been getting together and deciding we were Occupella, where am I going with this? What's the question again? Oh, yes. We got a website. My daughter is the internet guru, and she set us up a website. Once we had a website, I had an outlet for what I was writing. It became a blog. So people could read that. And we were lucky that we had a place to sing every week regularly. It wasn't just, always figuring out where we're going to go and who's going to go. There was a place, and that was the Tax the Rich rally on Solano in front of the old Oaks Theater, which had been started actually 2 weeks before Occupy Wall Street as the Tax the Rich rally, and we gradually became their standard singers. There were other people started it off, and then we ended up being the regulars.
And that went on for many years.
It went on until COVID. It lasted over 10 years.
Wow.
I'm
watching something else, but it's okay. I'm glad you called. No,
every week.
that's okay.
That was amazing. I used to go to it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to read something from Occupella to give people a taste of what's in it? And you will have to unmute yourself, Nancy. You're muted.
Okay. Okay, so Occupy started in October, and this is very early on. This is November 15th at UC Berkeley. There was the two sites in downtown Berkeley, and then there was UC Berkeley, which was a different organization doing Occupy, as well as Tax the Rich. So there was really stuff going on all around. And they were having a march, and then there was going to be a rally. So the march had gone by, and then I write, I have an hour to wait before the singing, so I stop in at a musical offering for a latte and a Florentine cookie, go to the car for my jacket, and stake out a bench in the plaza. Hallie comes, and then Bonnie with Betsy and a group of Betsy's peace singers, and finally, a couple from my announcement at the Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists open mic. So we have the biggest core group so far. One of Betsy's folks has made artful signs on a long bamboo pole saying Occupella and singing for peace. Some of the passers-by are there for the General Assembly at 5 and happy to have something to do or watch while they wait. We have our most successful sing so far, with many people contributing words to the zipper songs. Songs like We Shall Not Be Moved or Old MacDonald Had a Farm, in which one word or phrase changes from verse to verse. The rest stays the same. We hear cheering. The contingent from Oakland comes marching up Telegraph Avenue, carrying a tent high on a pole as their banner. Impressive and appropriate. Tonight is my turn to read at Mary Webb's writing workshop. And I say a little bit about her and say, it's particularly useful to get feedback from the younger members of the class. They tell me which bits, I was writing a biography of my mother, so I had been reading from that. They tell me which bits they need explained because it is ancient history to them. But twice I've taken a semester to do something else. Once to work on the libretto of a musical, and this past semester to write about Occupy. Tonight I read what I have written up to here, and I get an interesting response from one of the younger writers, a 20-something, who writes vivid dystopian science fiction. He says he has heard a lot about Occupy from his friends, but mostly in the form of political polemics. That just distances him, but he is drawn in by my personal account. Others nod at this. I am bolstered in my hope that I can reach people beyond the choir with this writing. And that's also the point where my teacher says, that my position as an artist and as the daughter of activists who told me stories about organizing in the 30s gave me a unique perspective that should be shared. And that's when I started thinking about making the blog into a book, which is a job on its own, because of course a book doesn't have links, a blog does, and you want it to be a little more formal, even though you don't want it to sound formal, but it needs to have, some structure. So that was a process, making the blog into a book.
It's very modern. You started out with a blog and then you turned it into a book.
Yes, a lot of people have done that. And I just want to give a shout out to Sayer Van Young, who I knew from the library, and she works now a lot with the Friends of the Library. And she was my final proofreader, and she was terrific. She really made this into a professional reading book, so I'm grateful to her for that.
Anybody who's written a book
Oh,
really values copy editors.
the first edition of this one, I had several friends proofread it, and this was before spell check, but the mind works kind of in the same way that spell check does, so that if it's an actual word, even though it's the wrong word, you read it as not a misspelling. Well, so my favorite mistake in the first edition of this was the gingerbread body instead of the gingerbread boy.
That's great. So when you're writing songs, Nancy, do you write them by yourself or do you write them with other songwriters?
A little of both. It's very frustrating being a singer during COVID because you can't synchronize singing on Zoom. There's a lag and it doesn't work. But I go to a songwriting workshop once a month, and there we're just each doing our own songs, so we can, that's not a problem, and we can give each other feedback. So that's really helpful. Sometimes I write a song and it needs to have a tune that's not the kind of tune I'm comfortable writing, and I'll go to someone else who can do that. So a lot of my songs are written with Candy Forrest, who is able to do pop and rock and roll and things like that, where I can do some of that, but I'm more folky. So that's great. And Judy Fiel and I have a real back and forth when we write a song together, because I'll send her the lyrics and she'll say, well, I think this line doesn't, so then I'll write this one song. We just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. She's in Montana. Luckily, we have the internet, so we can do this. And finally, I found a line that we both liked, and so then I knew it was right. So I really like collaborating with other people doing songs.
So you like writing with other people?
Yes. Yes, and actually in the Occupella book, there were demonstrations that I didn't go to. I had something else that day or a cold or whatever, and whoever was there could write it up. So some are, Hallie Hammer wrote up some things, and Betsy Rose wrote up some things. So we have, a little collaboration in here too.
So I know that you've been struggling with writing the biography of your mother. You want to tell us a little about that?
It's a struggle because there's so much information.
Tell us who she is, first of all.
Okay. Malvina Reynolds, songwriter and activist, who wrote she's most famous for Little Boxes, which she got fairly tired of, which she'd written about 400 other songs. But some of them, like Turn Around, got some publicity too. Um, and the thing is that I never intended to write her biography. I don't do long forms. I do, short stories, poems. But the woman who undertook to do it, who is a folklorist and had written a biography of Sarah Ogan Gunning, and just, I knew she would have the chops to do this. Plus, she had been a folk singer herself, so she kind of knew about performing from the inside. And her parents were socialist, and she just fit. But then she got post-polio syndrome and found that she was just not able to carry on. And so we were back and forth about who could do this. And I was saying, well, you're so perfect because da 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 da. And she said, well, yeah, but those things are all true about you too. So I undertook it, and she had interviewed, I don't know, 40 different people, and she had sent away from my parents and my maternal grandparents FBI records, and my mother's first husband's FBI records. We weren't just paranoid. When I was in high school, and I'd be on the phone with a friend, and we'd be doing geometry homework over the phone and talking about parallelograms and stuff like that. And I would say, boy, the FBI guy who's listening to this must really be bored now. Because I don't think they were listening to us, but they did interview neighbors. We were definitely in their sights. So, what was the question? Oh, about writing the biography. There's just so much to deal with. One of the things I love with writing is taking workshops where we're given prompts and we write to that prompt, and because you never know what's going to come out. It's really fun. And one of my teachers sort of challenged me to do NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. And so I didn't know what I was going to write about. But then I just got into writing this children's fantasy. And it was such a vacation from doing the biography because I didn't have to fact check anything. I mean, in a fantasy, you have to follow the rules that you've made up, but you are in charge. Whereas with the biography, I don't feel like I am. So it's been hard.
Yeah. So what would you say is the favorite when you go to these demonstrations? What would you say are the favorite songs? What do people really like and you sing most often?
Well, what people like to sing along on generally are, the old movement songs that we all know that have those verses that you just change. So we did things like I'm going to sit at the welcome table, stuff like that, with political verses in them because people can join in. The song that became kind of our theme song, as far as that we kind of felt represented us, and it was really fun for us to do because of the harmonies, which I can't reproduce, is one that I wrote the words to. It's a parody of Dadu Ron Ron called Occupy Pie. And I could give you a little bit of that.
Why don't you sing it for us?
We're tired of the cycles of boom and bust. We'll occupy pie, we'll occupy. The dough is only rising for the upper crust. We'll occupy pie, we'll occupy. Oh, the boom and bust. Oh, the upper crust. And if you take our homes, we'll occupy, we'll occupy. There's a slice for you and a slice for me. We'll occupy, we'll occupy. This here pie will set the people free. It's occupy, it's occupy. Oh, a slice for me. Oh, set the people free. And if you take our homes, we'll occupy, we'll occupy.
That's great. So would you sing different songs at the Tax the Rich?
Yes, we would sing more complicated songs there because we had a regular group of people who came to sing with us. So we had a whole lyric songbook. So we could do things like Leon Rosselson's World Turned Upside Down, about a peasant uprising in the olden days when they were fencing off the commons, which, you know, resonates with Tax the Rich and with Occupy, because they were occupying the commons. But then we did the things we do everywhere too, the more easily joined in on songs as well.
You want to sing another song from the Tax the Rich if you have one?
Do we have any questions from?
Not, let's see, I think there's only one. Did Nancy's mother encourage her to write and perform songs?
I didn't really start songwriting till pretty late in life, and I'm trying to remember. I was mainly storytelling and writing up stories and performing, and certainly she encouraged me to perform. But I wasn't really doing songwriting until I started driving around the country. I began a little bit of songwriting then. So yeah, but it wasn't part of my upbringing. It was
So
later.
when you were storytelling, did you sing?
Yes. I mean, some stories have songs embedded in them, or I would sing between songs to get the audience involved, especially with little kids. Definitely, usually folk songs, children's songs.
All right, we're running out of time. So Occupella, where is it available, Nancy, if somebody wants to buy?
Well, this is a problem I didn't realize until today. My storytelling book is at the library and it's on my website. The Occupella group was on the website of the people who printed it, and they do print on demand, so you could order it there. It's not there anymore. I checked and it's not there. I have a box of them, so let me put my email in the chat, and anyone who wants to can get.
What's your email, Nancy?
Yeah. It's Nancy Schimmel at mac.com.
Nancy what?
Nancy Schimmel at mac.com, and it's in the chat.
Okay, great.
And my website is sisterschoice.com. To order this one.
Okay.
And I'll ask my daughter to put this one on the website too, but I didn't have it because I thought it was on that other website. Yikes. It's a good thing. And we did this and I found that out.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Nancy. This was really, really interesting. Thank you for singing to us.
Well,
This
thank
is
you
the
for having
first
me.
singing interview. I loved it. And
Well,
thank
I look forward to the time when we can all get back together and have tea.
right. We I think we all do. And thank you all for coming.